Old, we don't really change well. I wore the same clothes.
I got your message. I
got your message.
I had emailed.
I saw it.
Now, when I listen to
Have your attention. Have everybody's attention.
No, that's me. I have both.
Hey,
I
Jim,
haven't set the PS.
your attention, please.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I've kind of got laryngitis, but I'll get through it. Just wanted to welcome everybody to our third meeting. It's the third meeting of our master plan citizen oversight group. Really excited about this meeting because we get to review our survey, and that survey is going to guide us through the rest of our process. So can't wait to see those results and can't wait to get started. We like to start the meeting with our honorable mayor, but I think he's under the weather today. So, we'll move past that and jump right in. At this time, I'd ask Jim if you would please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
So if you'll please stand if you are able. Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time, we'd like to review the meeting minutes from last month. If there are no changes, I would like to accept a motion to accept those as is, or listen to any changes anybody might want to. Yes, ma'am.
I will move that we accept the as is, but did we need a roll call first? Before I do that?
For attendance?
Yep. Thank you. Chair Rowden,
Here.
Vice Chair Loyal,
Here.
Member McCutcheon,
Here.
Member Rambo,
Here.
Member Clark,
Here.
Member Conway, Member Avery,
Here on Zoom.
Yes.
Member Shicon,
Here.
Member Coleman,
Here.
Member Metz,
Here.
He's on Zoom as well.
Member Wren,
Here.
Member Pick,
Here.
Member Boomer Schlegel,
Here.
Member Baker,
Here.
Member Boren, Member Helfrey,
Here.
Member Cohn,
It's on Zoom.
Member Clayton,
Here.
Member Depler,
Here.
Member Jackson,
Here.
Member Rubis,
Here.
Member Beatty, Member Brost, and the mayor is also absent. And we have quorum.
And the agenda is accepted as is. Thank you. Okay, moving on, looking at an opening video from staff. Wildwood.
Mr. Chair, we have, Ms. Clark had made a motion to approve the minutes and we did not receive a second and hold. Sorry. Thank you. And then a voice vote on that is just fine.
I'll second it.
Mr. Loyal.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Rubis.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'll introduce the video, if you don't mind. Members of the group, welcome tonight. We sure appreciate it. We want to give a couple of shout outs. Ms. Peck brought some stacks. I think something she does in her business, so we sure appreciate it. She asked me at the end of last month's meeting if she could. Certainly, we appreciate it very much. To forget somebody, Ms. Clark, if you see all the baked goods over here, it's from Ms. Clark. She is well known at our city council for doing a very, very good job. Thank you both.
Thank you.
As with all of our meetings, if you feel like getting up and getting some coffee, some water, or any of the snacks, again, it's informal and just help yourself. Don't feel like you have to sit there for the full 2 hours. And then to all of you again, just thank you for showing up tonight. I know the weather's less than desirable, but we're on a bit of a time frame. But, yeah, I appreciate it. So in past updates, for the most part, in 2006 and in 2016, a lot of the technology we have available to us now wasn't available. Certainly, we didn't have the capabilities of Zoom or along those lines. And from the perspective of the department, we did the best we could to introduce information on each element. It was done with the benefit of some mapping, some photographs. But for this particular update, the department thought it might be appropriate that before each element, we provide you a video. And the video hopefully will give you an introduction to the element and some of the key points in the element relative to goals, objectives, and policies. Certainly, it's something we think would be beneficial to the discussion that will follow here very shortly. I hope you do too. But as with any of the agenda items over the course of our series of meetings between now and the end of the year, if you feel it's something that isn't appropriate or something that could be done better, that's what we want to hear as well. So tonight, we're going to start with our environmental video, shorter than the one we did for the incorporation. 3.5, 4 minutes. And it was done by Miss Ward in conjunction with the and Miss Ward, raise your hand, was our consultant that orchestrated the survey, very successful survey, and was helping us with the preparation of our public health. Those are videos, if we continue them after, posted on the website, so people can see them as well as they go follow our progress as a group for an updated 2026 master plan. With that, I'm going to dim the lights and I'm going to ask Mr. Well, again, the intent was to kind of introduce the element that we're going to be talking about today. It highlights some of our successes from the last 29 plus years. And also sets out some goals, objectives and policies, I think, need to be discussed by this board with the course of this meeting and going to the next meeting. With that, Mr. Chair, we've done our introduction.
Like to move on to survey results and introduce Debbie Ward. Thank you very much for coming. And we look forward to seeing your presentation. Silver tablet mark.
Thank you very much. I have had the pleasure of working with the city of Wildwood on a number of initiatives over the years, and I was very happy to be a part of this project as I am also a resident of Wildwood. I've been a resident for 27 years, I think now. So this is also very important to me personally. We can, with the help of the city and with their input, I created a survey of 10 questions that we sent out to residents via several different methods. We posted it on our social media channels several times. So it went out on Facebook and on Instagram with links so that it could be completed. And the city also put it on the electronic sign in town center, and then also had some posters that we put up in Schnucks and Anniversary Park. And through those efforts, we got about 770 responses in a very short period of time. It was about 3 weeks. The survey was out for about 3 weeks, and so that was a great response, we felt, for the outreach that we did. I completed a report at the end of that time that is in front of each of you, and there's a qualitative analysis and a quantitative analysis. So the last question on the survey asked, what is your vision for Wildwood going forward? What do you think the future of Wildwood should be? And so there were certain themes that emerged throughout those answers. There were over 600 people who answered the open-ended question. And you can see all of those responses at the back of this document. Each and every one of them is included in this report. The themes that emerged, as you can see in the report, the one that was the most prevalent was sustainable development, which is not a surprise. If you live in the city of Wildwood, you know that that is something that is constantly talked about. So that was the theme that was the most mentioned. The second was improved infrastructure and transportation. There was concern about the traffic on the roads, particularly up on 109 area, and also about the condition of roads as well. The third was maintaining a safe, family-friendly community feel, and that came up quite a bit. And that was often combined with responses that were about sustainability and development. So it was kind of a combined theme of retaining a rural character, retaining a small town feel, retaining a family, community type of environment, while at the same time being careful about development, being careful about natural resources, and equity, honestly. So that economic development and job opportunities was the next thing that was mentioned. There was a number of responses of people that were concerned about job creation in Wildwood, particularly for younger people. There was concern about the development of town center and the number of businesses that have come and gone in town center and the number of vacancies in town center. That was also mentioned quite a bit. Affordable housing was also mentioned. This was particularly in terms of younger families and retirees. So people at kind of two ends of the spectrum, wanting to live in Wildwood, but finding that the housing prices were just not affordable. There was a teacher in particular that mentioned that she can't afford to live here even though she works here. A part of that was also retirement housing and retirement communities for people who don't want to stay in the houses that they have owned for years, but would like to stay in one. And then after that was enhanced cultural and recreational amenities. Again, this is something that if you live in Wildwood, you know, comes up over and over again. A lot of people mentioned wanting a pool, pickleball courts, tennis courts, and basically recreation areas where they can meet other families and other community members. And then the last big theme was improved governance and civic engagement. There were mixed reviews on that. Some people commented that they thought it was very well done, that the government was run well, that there was a lot of transparency, and then there were people that were unhappy. And then the last was preservation of character and history, and this kind of ties in with the rural character, economic or development of housing developments, keeping the forested areas forested. That was kind of all tied together with preservation of character and history. There are a number of people who mentioned the historic properties in Wildwood, who mentioned Route 66 in Wildwood, and their desire to retain those things because they felt that they were important to the character of Wildwood. On the next page, you can see that there's a table of the prevalence of these themes. So you can see the frequency and the percentage. There were a number of people who mentioned several things, so you'll see that those don't add up exactly to the number of surveys that of people who had open-ended questions. I will note that there were a couple of interesting outlier comments. One was about art in Wildwood and the desire to have public displays of art. There was another person who commented about creating more industry in Wildwood, in particular technology. And then I will note that for the quantitative analysis, or I'm sorry, the qualitative analysis, I did use AI to help me with this. I ran these responses through three different AI models, ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Gemini. And all three of them came up with these themes. I did not use any personal information when I put that information into AI, into those models. So I stripped out the zip codes, I stripped out names, emails, and they didn't have IP addresses. So all of that was stripped out before I put those responses into the model to get the results. That's important just for a personally identifiable information perspective. The quantitative questions you can see after the qualitative analysis. There's bar charts and then also the numbers of responses for each of the questions. You can see that most of the responses came from the zip code 63040, which is town center. That makes sense because the electronic sign was in town center and that's probably where most people saw it. But it did go out to everybody through social media. So obviously there was plenty of opportunity for other people to take the survey. And then I'll just let you look through the rest of it. The bar charts are pretty easy to read. The questions were a rating system of how do you feel about this question? You know, I agree, I disagree, with levels in between there. So you can see those on the colored bar charts. And overall, I think the sentiment was that Wildwood is doing pretty well. Of course, there's people that are unhappy about certain things and people that are happy about certain things. So some people were very happy in the comments and said, there was one person that said, don't change anything. And then there were people who wrote a lot about things that they wanted to have changed. So, but overall, I think it gives you a good idea of the themes that you'll see, and they are the themes that match the elements that you're going to be talking about as you go through this process.
So, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd like Ms. Stone to kind of walk us through the main questions
Excellent.
and then kind of get your all's feedback, what you thought. I gotta ask Ms. Ward about it, et cetera. So we'll start with item A, sustainable.
Hi, everybody. I think I met most of you, or you might remember me from a couple months ago. So I'm Julie Stone. I'm facilitating you through this process. You know, I do want to say this is our first meeting where we're dealing with a lot of information. And so we're going to be doing this, right, over the next few months. And I think tonight is kind of, for me, our practice run to see how it goes, because there's always going to be a better way to parse the information, right? If you have suggestions that you want to provide to staff about, you know, what might work better for you, or even to walk up to me afterwards, I'm always happy to have that feedback, because there's never going to be a perfect way for the way everybody processes information and expresses information to be able to get this. My goal is at the end of this meeting, or at the end of each meeting, we've got a pretty good sense when we go around and do those last words that everybody goes, I feel heard. I think what I said was captured someplace. It was in the minutes, right? For staff to be able to deal with. Because our goal, and I know that Mr. Vunich will talk about this later in the meeting, is that they're gonna take all this and redraft the section that you've read and then show it back to you and say, did we get it? And so just sort of capturing all these sentiments so that they can take that and try to draft something that you get to go, yeah, you heard me, that's kind of what we said. I think that Deb said something really important. When you're dealing with as many people as in this room from diverse backgrounds, and even if you're all from the same community, and all of these incredible comments, where it's about building consensus. I'm gonna constantly remind you that there is never a way that I can see, unless you guys are one in a million, that we are gonna do every single thing on every single point that is gonna make everybody in this room happy. So you'll hear me ask about the heartburn test. You know, I'm gonna ask you, can you live with this? I hate good enough, because it's good enough for government work is not something that works for me as somebody who's worked in government for 30 years, okay? I hate that. But have we reached a place where even if there's some disagreement in this room, that everybody can go, yeah, I'm okay. Like, I know that I don't agree with that 100% and that the next person doesn't either, but I think I'd be okay with that. And I think the people that I'm here at this table, and I'm gonna remind you of that a lot. And it's real, I'm not gonna lecture you on it, but I'm gonna remind you of it, because we're gonna hit, I think, a couple of points in the next year where we're gonna be looking for perfect. And it's really hard to get perfect when you're dealing with this much input and this many great perspectives around the table. Are there any questions about that, or does that make sense to everybody? It's really hard, because everybody wants to do this exactly right, right? And they know how they're feeling and how the people they're here representing feel. And sometimes it's just really tough. So I'm always gonna ask you the heartburn test, and we wanna hear if there's heartburn, because maybe there's a way around it. Maybe we can come up with something else. And we need to know that you're kind of settling a little bit. But when we get to that point where everybody goes, yeah, that's okay, like, then we're at a point that these guys can work with effectively, right? So just keep thinking about that in the room. It's about consensus, not complete agreement all the time. And for those of you who've served on councils, et cetera, you already know that. But for those of you who introduced yourselves as not having done this kind of thing before, that's probably worth it for you guys to hear, is that it's part of that deal to get there. So that said, we want to start with Deb's incredible work. I've done community engagement. This is quite a response. Not surprised from the kind of community you are, but any city would be happy with a response of this magnitude from this many people. Here's my other nudge reminder. It's a lot of material, right? It's going to be hard for you to be effective overall every time to give feedback if you haven't found or been able to find the time to review it before we get here. I'm kind of allowed to say that. It's hard for staff to say that to you, right? So because I mean, I had to go through and we had to read this and look at their recommendations and read all these things. And there's, you know, at the point that you're trying to give feedback doing this, right, as you're looking at it, try if you have a few minutes beforehand. We really are going to be looking at some of these things in depth. I'm going to be saying, how do you feel? What's missing? It's going to be a little bit harder to do that on the fly if you haven't had a time to dive into some of the stuff that staff is giving you beforehand. So I would really turn around. I think you'll figure that out this meeting and say, try to find that half hour or whatever it takes and use your pen, right? Mark, so for those of you who haven't done this before, mark stuff up. Use a highlighter, fold down pages so that when I say, what don't you like or what you like, you can turn around and go, please, Julie, write down on page 5, I hated this, or I loved this thing, or whatever it is, so that we can capture that, okay? So that said, what I think I'd like to do on this, first of all, is based on hopefully what you've taken a look at, before we go into breaking it all up, does anybody have questions for Deb about this survey, the information that she collected, how she broke it up, the things that, right, that came up as main themes? Before we go, this is all perfect. I'd like to have a few minutes, if any of you have any comments that you want to kind of share with the group about questions about just this document. Sure.
Yeah, the question of how you actually weight the data. Is it strictly numerical? Is it strictly a fraction?
In terms of how I, which was most important,
Right.
volume of answers. So the
Okay.
number of people that mentioned that particular theme, the most is first.
Okay.
People
There's
mentioned,
no other factors.
no, just
No.
the number of responses that mention that particular theme.
Anybody else? Questions for Deb on what's in that packet, how she came up with the themes?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cohn is online on Zoom and he's not able to stay for the whole meeting, so he's got his hand raised. We can go to him next.
Let's do that. Mr. Coon, go ahead.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
You can.
Okay. You know, I read through the survey and I'm pleased with all the results. But as you look at the answers, you see people that want more retail, they want Target, they want Whole Foods, that they also want less development. They want more woods, more open space, more retail, more restaurants. I mean, these things don't work in concert. It's like saying, I want to have a lot of eggs, but chickens aren't allowed. People have to realize that you have to have a little give and take on both sides to accomplish the goals of getting the town center vibrant. They also need to understand certain aspects of the city's finances. Real estate taxes, for example. Wildwood does not participate in any real estate taxes. In addition, sales tax. Wildwood doesn't have a sales tax. They're part of the St. Louis County sales tax pool, and that's where we generate our income. But most importantly, what people are saying they want and don't want, they can't both happen. So compromise is the one thing I wanted to get across to everyone and how important that is. Thank you. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. I actually think that community engagement in and of itself, forgetting what it's going to tell you as an advisory committee that people are thinking, is wonderful feedback for staff and for the elected officials as to where the level of understanding or even misunderstanding of some governance structures, things like property tax. And that is something that staff and the council can use in a communications piece to, begin to correct maybe some of those things that people need to understand better for this process. So just remember that this tool that you've been provided has many more uses than simply just maybe informing this master plan. It does give you some sense of where people are kind of sitting. I couldn't agree more. So do we have any other questions right now? Mr. Remler.
Comment that this may not happen until the 2035 iteration of this process, but it would have been very handy. I read all the comments. They were great, but it would have been handy for me as a council person particularly to have them broken down by zip code or even better yet, by ward, so that we can kind of understand, get a feel for what our ward is thinking versus the other ward. Not necessarily the same.
We can do that. We did talk about that actually.
Right.
That should be pretty easy. Yes, I
If
can
you
do
can still,
that.
if you can do that now, that'd be great for us because we have,
Yeah.
I got a
can-
feeling this
I
is
can
gonna
do
go
that
into the
and send
next.
that to the city.
right.
Creating cross tab. So we're
I
gonna
can do
capture.
it by zip code. And then extrapolate into wards from there.
Good enough.
So we've noted that maybe a request to create some, what they call it, cross tabs, right? To take zip code and look at things and take other things. So that's a great suggestion. Other questions in general? Clark? I'll come there.
Recognized by whoever,
Sure.
but
Go ahead,
the,
Teresa.
thank you. Yes, as far as the zip code goes, I was looking at all of the responses and where they're all from. And maybe we should consider the next time when we break it down into maybe even members of the team, having it broken down by land mass instead of by wards, because we have a lot of wards that are very small in land mass. And they have a lot of responses coming from one small area. And for this element that we're going into, environmental, for wards 1 and 6 on the west side, mainly on the west side of 109, there's a lot of land mass that area, I think, needs to be more represented in the environmental area.
I think I understand where you were going with that. Okay, I saw one more. I'm sorry, Mr. Rubis.
Yeah, I was just looking, and the thing that jumped out at me was in some of these questions where they're asking, how are you feeling? How's that? The biggest response is somewhat.
Yeah, it means it's not a big.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I don't know, and that's the largest response.
Deb, how would you understand somewhat? I mean, to me, it just means it's not the highest priority for somebody.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of important, but it's not really something that registers.
I would agree.
Does that make sense? So I think that's the way I might read it, is if you're seeing that somewhat, think about when you take a survey. If you put somewhat, it's kind of a meh. Yeah, it's not a 0. It's important, but it's not necessarily, coming up as the most important.
What, for example, question 8, how satisfied are you with the decisions that are being made regarding new development, service delivery, infrastructure, planning, park, trail initiatives in Wildwood? And over 50% of the response was somewhat. So are we saying that that's not important to them?
No, I think what we're saying is, I would say what we're saying is they're all right. They're not, they're fine. Sorry, Deb, do you wanna?
Yeah, I also think that for people who don't understand exactly what's going on, that's the answer they choose.
Yeah.
So they're not intimately familiar with exactly the regulations and the impact of those things that are being decided in the government, so they're putting, I'm somewhat. I don't really know, so
I'm gonna do last one on this because I do want to get to a few of the specifics. Go ahead.
Just an observation that a couple of those questions might have been overly broad, like it's really hard to say, okay, I love what you're doing with parks. I hate what you're doing with development, and you kind of have to say somewhat. So that's how I would do that.
I think that's pretty fair too. I think all those things. Okay. I think because this is such a big chunk, what I'd like to do is ask you the same question about each section, because that'll allow everybody to look at the same thing. That broke it down into several themes. What I'd love to do quickly is sustainable development obviously ties to this environmental piece, pretty big, but each section, can you take a look? Let's look at sustainable development first. And just ask, based on our theme, right, and what you've heard and read, do you think as a group, was there something you were surprised by? Was there something you were concerned to hear in this section? And was there something that you thought the citizens missed entirely, which happens occasionally from different perspectives? So just looking at sustainable development as a grouping, are there any comments, concerns? things that you noticed.
Where are you on here?
I'm on I'm on the very second page of the handout about
Okay.
survey. Sorry.
Page numbers would be wonderful.
Page numbers would be wonderful.
Would
Next,
have been a good
next
addition, I agree.
suggestion. Okay, second page.
Okay, so as far as the sustainable development goes, that kind of ties in with some of the questions, and then it ties in with a lot of the comments in the
I
back.
agree.
So if you just look by this, that's just a small part of what you're asking us to have a comment on. Because when I look at this and I see the development, one of the things that I saw time and time again was the complaint that there's too much development, which I thought was really interesting, because there's really not. At least I don't think, I mean, being on planning and zoning, I kind of see a little bit of what goes on with the development, and I don't think that we're developing a lot. I mean, would you think so, Mr. Bridge?
I'll let the group tell me.
Well, I mean, I think that people have this misconception when they look at downtown, the downtown area, and they see Brightleaf, and they see that the trees get knocked down. They think that that the city of Wildwood is knocking down all the trees and we're gonna plow over everything and level it all out and build it, and that's not what we do. And I think that that's a huge misconception.
I would feed on that. I think perception becomes reality. It's because of all the subdivisions going in. And it was in a pre-planned area for the most part, and we have a lot of P and Z meetings on that. So it's just in one area that was designated to grow, I mean, it's no secret. I have friends across the nation that dial in the P and Z. They love it. They love the government. And they have a game every time. Well, I'll just say it's a drinking game. Every time McBride comes up, they have to take a drink. Okay?
That's hilarious.
Yes, I know, right? So I'm sitting here, I come out of that, I'm like, are you guys okay? But anyway, there's McBride, there's whatever, and so people see that. So to your point, you're right. But the
Could I have that in
perception-
writing?
You're right.
That I might have.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, you're right, but the perception is there's a lot because it's happening
Right,
right.
it's all in one area, right?
And I just heard also that it's growth that was planned for,
Correct?
but folks may not necessarily realize that growth was planned for if they're not as in tune with the master planning process or any of that. So I think that's a great point. Other points on this?
The one thing I would add is, I know a lot of people who put comments in about that. And they are in the Ward 5 area that when they first moved here, it was not part of the plan for it to be so high density. But the other thing that I will make separate point from that is, it says sustainable development. I think a lot of people who provided input for this were focusing more on the sustainable. Yes, there is development. There is opportunity for development in the rest of the city, but I think most people are very concerned and hopeful that it will be sustainable. Just, creep from town center area out to the, more rural of the city.
So I've got the concern of citizens that growth remains sustainable and that we don't end up with, and I'm going to call it exactly what you did, development creep. Okay. Right here.
Yeah, I think the perception of the community that I hear from the most is that there's so many developments being put up at once.
Okay.
That it feels like there's too much density.
Okay.
There's too much density in general, there's too much in certain places.
Okay.
If you compare the older neighborhoods on the east side with the new neighborhoods coming in, the new neighborhoods are more dense than the older neighborhoods. Now, I know most of the older neighborhoods were constructed under St. Louis County. The newer ones, of course, are constructed by Wildwood. But I think in general, the residents go by all these developments popping up.
Right.
Or if they pay attention to P and Z or council, they hear us talking about what's coming. And so it's a lot happening at once, and two, the houses are much closer together. And I think, I don't know about everybody else, but 30 years ago when I moved to Wildwood, I was told from that point on, it was going to be one house per acre. That is, of course, not what we're doing.
Right.
And was town center ideas and put together constructed that way? I don't think so. Now, I wasn't here when town center plan was developed. But I think the perception of the public is it's just too dense and too much at once.
I think this is great because whether or not that is reality, because I see nods around the table, right? Going, yeah, maybe, maybe not. To your point, it may be what citizens believe is occurring because of what they're seeing while they're driving, and it may explain some of this stuff, right? So with that, I'm gonna allow one more on this and I'm gonna move on because I want to watch time.
Yeah, so I want to have everybody look at it from a different perspective. So as I've announced before, my daughter's 21, she's graduating next year. She has a large group of friends who went to Lafayette High School and their home is in Wildwood. I felt that their input would be just as important because they're coming back home when they're done with college as people who have lived here for 30 years. And when we say perception is reality, I think we need to also consider whose perception, because somebody who's newer to Wildwood or a younger family moving in isn't going to have the same perception as somebody that's lived in the community for quite a bit longer.
But the issue is for you guys is that everybody becomes, all of those perceptions become important. So how do you do that? I'm coming over here. Deb?
I just want to say that if you look at the
I see him.
question of how long,
Thank you.
excuse me, how long have you lived in Wildwood? Most of the people that answer the question have lived here for
Well, and so a lot of my daughter's friends have lived here since birth. So you know what I mean? Again, that's, if somebody says they lived here for 21 years, that doesn't mean they're in their 40s or 50s, is just my input. I think we just need to consider it.
I think that you're, and Mayor Garitano, we see you and I'm coming in that direction, I promise. I think one of the things you have to recognize is that in a community like any community like this, there's always going to be sort of, I'm going to use a term. It's a little bit old guard versus new guard, right? I mean, there's that tension between I moved here expecting this versus I founded the place. And, you know, we'll see that, you know what I mean? We'll see a little bit of that here. So I think that that's a concern. Mayor Garitano, I see your hand is up because Mr. Roughton told me it was.
All right, thank you so much for calling on me here. I did just want to chime in around the theme of perception because I do feel Wildwood has a perception problem. And when we talk about development, the data completely contradicts the perception. And I will give you the data just now, just to analyze for a second, because we always talk about subdivisions and the number of homes. And my analysis through the data from the Department of Planning from 2014 to 2016, the city did go through quite a development explosion during that time. Subdivisions were approved. 415 homes were approved during that phase. And the acreage that was developed was 149 acres. So averaging out about 0.36 acres per home. But in 2016, up until now, the city has only seen, and I'm going to first focus on built, 26 homes. That's it, subdivision wide. 26 homes. And we're talking about across 10 acres. So when people say there is a development problem, the data is not there because since 2016, those last big subdivisions that were approved in Wildwood were Villages of Brightleaf and Main Street Crossing. Those were all approved around the time I came onto council, 2015, 2016. But even right now, there isn't a single, well, I'll take that back. There is a subdivision now that just recently started, the Reserve, where they started doing work. But up until about a month ago or so, we could have said, we don't have any active construction within the town center. There is a subdivision outside of the town center by Melrose, which I think is about maybe a dozen or so homes. But I think we have a responsibility that we have to provide the residents with the proper data so that this perception, because it's never going to go away, it will never go away. People will believe. I've had people tell me there's construction going on right now in the town center, like prior to the Reserve. And I'm like, where is it? Take me, show me. Because there isn't. There wasn't at the time. So I just want to make sure, because the perception, I think, taints a lot of times the data too from the surveys that we got. And so I think Wildwood, we have an important task in this master plan as elected officials to make sure we're telling the correct story of what's going on in Wildwood. Because otherwise, in the absence of us going out and telling the story, the perception will become reality.
Thank you, Mayor. Just so you know, I captured, tell the story, provide residents with the proper data as part of this process. I think that that's great feedback for this engagement section. I've got, it looks like Miss Avery, and then I've got Vicky in the room. I'm sorry, I'm gonna do a few first names and last names. It's just me messing up. Miss Avery, can you go ahead?
Yeah, I just had a question for Mayor Gaetano. Joe, are you saying that Villages of Brightleaf, that neighborhood was approved prior to 2015, 2016, or that it was built?
It was approved January 25th, 2016. And so building obviously takes a period of time.
Okay.
I believe it was, I will defer to Department of Planning, but I'm going to believe it was like a 2 or 3 year process.
Okay, so when you say we've only built 26 new homes in a certain time frame, you mean we've only approved the building of 26 new homes?
The approval, yes.
Okay.
Yes, because in 2016, I'll just run through it quickly. There's not that many. Old Town Park subdivision, 4 homes. Center Avenue had 1 individual home. That's not even a subdivision. Lindy Lane had 1 home. Grover Heights had 1 home. Wesley Park had 4. Ashley Grove never got built. 12 homes on my list. And another 10, we had 3 homes. That's all I have on the list. And Melrose, if you want to count outside of the town center.
I think that's perfect. Can we put a cap on it there, guys? Does that answer the question, Hannah?
Yes.
Perfect. Vicky, I'm coming back to you, and then I'm gonna put a time on this one and we're gonna move on, okay?
This, my question is for Mr. Vunich. So someplace in all of this conversation, there was a question about the perception of what downtown Wildwood was supposed to be and when it was supposed to be that. So I know that we were on the Town Center Update Committee a couple years ago. When was downtown Wildwood created? Was it initially with the initial master plan? And how much has it changed from what it initially was to what it is today?
Ms. Helfrey, I started prior to September 1st, 1995. I met with the principal planner that was to do the master plan, Jonathan Barnett, and the group of incorporators had already come up with the 4 main land use categories, one of which was town center. So town center has been baked in the bread since the oven started, so to speak. In terms of additions, actually, when Andres Dewani, the consultant that did the town center plan, came to town and did the 5-day charrette, town center was much larger than it is today. In fact, as he left and we took the town center boundary map out, many of the individuals that were on the periphery said, we don't want to be part of town center. We don't know what this new urbanism is. We don't like the idea of you pre-zoning property. We just want to be left alone. And we honored their request. So from the perspective of where we started and where we ultimately adopted the plan, it's a much smaller area. I think Mayor Gaetano says it's about 800 acres or a little over a square mile of 68 square miles. In 2018, we added roughly about 50 acres to town center. A portion on the south edge by Grover Crossing, if you're familiar with that on Manchester Road. And we extended the boundary out to Pond Road to include several larger parcels of ground that have development potential because they have availability of sewers. So big to small with a small couple of additions.
Thank you.
Hang on one sec.
I have something that just hits me.
Hang on one sec.
To the mayor's point, I think we as a group could put together a 1-page graphic, which is a metric on how to measure exactly what we're talking about. And anybody can look at that graphic and know within 5 minutes where we are on development. Thank you.
The development infographic.
I think I'm gonna feed on what he's saying
And then
here.
I'm gonna make you the last one until I keep
Fine,
going. Go ahead.
but I have reread A about 10 times while we were sitting here. Okay? Can anyone tell me what sustainability is? Can anyone tell me what sustainable development is? Do we have a definition for that? I'm going into a board meeting in DC next week, and it's about fiber optics and how it's sustainable. It's what a social justice wants to hear. It's what a politician wants to hear. But if we use, this is a really great word, man, because man, someone reads this, man, sustainable. What the heck does that mean here? Can we define what's, you know what, it's great, but we're the ones making the decision here on the master plan. Why don't we define what sustainable development is to Wildwood? And if you can define that in this, then it tells people what it is. And I think that's probably gonna be a very tough task. But I think it's necessary personally. So that's my 2 cents. What is sustainable development? If someone wants to take a crack at it, or we all want to do it, or I don't care.
Right.
But this does, I read it over and over. I don't know what it is.
But it's a great point. It's a conversation that has happened regardless of politics for a long time, because some people read it as environmental, some people read it as economic, right? Does the
Sure.
building last? Will it still be here? Is it built that way? I mean, so it absolutely is something, it could be defined always,
Yeah,
right? It
you
could
just
be-
made my
there's
point.
a couple of
Asbestos is,
ways you could
asbestos
say-
is very sustainable. It will last forever.
Unless you crack the tile, right?
You're exactly right.
Unless you crack the tile.
You got the, so they can say, years ago, see how sustainable asbestos would have been. We all know we don't want that.
So I think that's a great point. Okay. You know, what's interesting about this is that what I said at the beginning is we're gonna figure out how this plays out. And I think that these comments are all very tied, right? This issue of, we're learning that maybe community perception is perception. It's, some of it's correct, some of it's subjective, some of it needs to be fixed. So I think it's a very educational process that Deb has given you to hear sort of where people are, and some of them are probably really aligned with what you're thinking, and some of them you're like, wait a minute, that's not exactly right. I probably am gonna wanna come back, if it's okay, with these folks. I think we're gonna probably revisit this community engagement survey in future meetings. We're not gonna parse everything that you've read, because you're gonna keep reading it and hearing it as we go through each topic. But I do want to, because I can tell right now that if I take you through transportation, Deb, hang on one sec, let me just finish the thought. If I take you through transportation and maintaining families and all those things as to what you're reading into it, we're gonna have a lot of really great pages of stuff that you're saying, well, this is what people are thinking, and here's how we need to incorporate it. So, Deb, why don't you go ahead? But I think I'm not going to take this one by one, only because I think there's more to say here, right? And I'm gonna figure out a way to do it. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that sustainable development is the topic of the theme. The question, one of the questions was, how well do you think Wildwood has balanced maintaining its natural environment while allowing for growth and development? So that is the question that's reflected in that theme of sustainable
Balance.
development. I think that's a little bit of what we're looking for in
Question
terms of
number?
a definition. It's question 5.
Thank you.
So the sustainable piece comes from balancing the environment with growth.
Growth and development. I mean, I put that under, the theme, but the question is more clear, I think.
Okay, I want to ask for next few minutes just to put a cap on this, I promise. Yeah, go ahead.
Just from the perspective of the department, I
Yeah.
don't know if Ms. Ward's gonna be available for the next sections or responses to the questions. And I had advised you all that if we didn't get to the environment element, or if we just got to part of it, we would start with that at the next meeting. When I talked to Jonathan Barnett before we formed this group, he basically sent me one question. You gotta know what people like, you gotta know what people don't, and that's the survey. So contrary to the facilitator, I would like to continue forward and at least finish off the survey while Ms. Ward's here to help us understand it.
I'm great with that if you guys are. I mean, you don't have to be contrary to me. I'm here to help you.
So if we could go to the next one, improve infrastructure and
Okay, I'm
transportation.
great. So you're happy with what you're hearing is definitely helpful for you guys.
I think so. I would defer to my colleagues, but
Good. I mean, like, again, that's what I'm here to do, right? Okay, let's talk, and you may not have as many comments, right? Because some of these are general to a lot of things. So looking at improved transportation and infrastructure feedback. We'll keep going. I like that. I'll give you a minute. This really seems to highlight traffic congestion, accessible and reliable public transportation options, and bikeability and walkability. Those were the three kind of big things I saw.
How do we balance state roads with city roads?
Allen roads versus city roads.
So, Mr. Chair, why don't you tell me what, I'm thinking about the sustainability question. How do you mean balance? Because state roads are state roads and city roads are city roads. So how do
They
you,
have to interact and they have to blend.
okay? So it's much more of that interaction of.
Integration thereof.
Other folks? I don't expect people to answer. I want your questions, your concerns, what's missing.
I would
Anybody
also
else on
just
this?
add, as part of that, item B, they do talk about improving internet and cell service in the underserved areas of Wildwood, which is.
Right, because it's infrastructure too.
It was a major initiative of the city for many, many years.
Okay,
And we still have certain households that don't have. Despite our best efforts, I will say.
I've got need for reliable internet that still exists. Other things, concerns on infrastructure, transportation, public transit, biking. From the public perspective, remember, we're really dealing with this from the perspective of what you see in the survey. Vicky, go ahead.
Are you looking for specific requests?
I'm just looking for your feedback and reactions to what you're seeing here.
So I saw in here someplace that someone felt like the college road was needed to be addressed, where we have the college and we have the YMCA and all those things. That's a big quagmire there. And then what I hear time and time again is the intersection of Highway 100 and Highway T. What? Yeah, well, those are the two that I hear all the time, and I know for a fact I saw the one in College Station in here somewhere.
Okay.
Oh, and I would like to just plug Wildwood. If you go on Strecker Road, you go towards Kerr's Mill, Wildwood repaired potholes, and then at Chesterfield's boundary, the mess. So there you go.
That was,
Well done,
so
Wildwood.
that was a pat on the back. We like attaboy and girl. Okay. Perceptions and comments about what you read about this topic.
Yes, what I'm finding that it seems like it's missed throughout, and especially here, is accessibility. We try to meet ADA requirements, but sometimes we miss actually making things acceptable. So to add that into most everything that even for sustainability, it would be important. But when I read through all of these comments, one thing that keeps coming up in my mind is we haven't done much to educate our residents so that they know why there's not, maybe they wanted more development or they wanted less development, or why it is the way it is. And if you sat down with Mr. Bunich or Mr. Newberry, or any of the people in the departments, they could explain to you so well why it is the way it is and why we make these policies and ordinances are passed. So maybe if we have a goal that goes along with each one of our elements that includes education.
Interesting. Now, I will tell you that sometimes when cities do that, they'll get the folks like you who are the most engaged and need it the least that'll come to those education sections. But sometimes they'll get new people, and every new people educates other new people. So it's definitely a cool idea and a cool ad, so thank you. Because you're saying, there's a lot of stuff here about how do we correct perception. So citizen education is a great one. It's just making sure that everybody partakes, because it's not necessarily the top of their list. What else do we have on transportation, bikes, IT?
I think perception is the problem too with the roads. I don't think a lot of people understand the difference between the state roads.
They don't.
And maybe that's something that could be addressed in the Gazette.
Like what, educating people, what is the difference? Who does what?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Got it. I like that. What else? Anything else on this, or should we close this one out? It's not, come over there, and Hannah, you've got one. The folks are keeping me honest about who's on screen because my back is a little bit to the screen.
Thank you. I do want to say, I think education is a choice, right? Like we can't force this information down people's throats, unfortunately. But as a mom, I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. I look at 109. I do look at these concerns, these genuine safety concerns that we can address. And to me, that would be more important than educating somebody who just wants to hate on the city government or doesn't want to see further development, right? Like there's things we can control and there's things we can't. And I think safety is another theme we see throughout this. And that's where my priority personally would lie. And that's where I think a lot of parents would lie too.
So I just captured, since you can't see it, genuine safety concerns must be prioritized.
Yes.
Anybody else on this one, or am I moving to the next one for a moment? We can always come back, right? I mean, maybe not with Deb here, but if somebody comes up next week and goes, hey, I had a thought, we'll always capture them, okay? Next one on the list is maintain safe, family-friendly community feel. I'm guessing there may not be too much discussion on this one, that everybody might agree. But why don't you take a look at it and tell me if you had any thoughts about missing, concerns, questions, additions to what people are saying, your people are saying. Want to hear somebody say that's not an important thing here. I kind of doubt it. Got anybody up there? Okay, I had a feeling that might not be too controversial. I'm gonna keep going. Okay, economic development and job opportunities. Now, I want to point out, you've covered a little bit of that in this town center growth conversation. Job opportunities, and there's a whole conversation last night in a course that I'm teaching about keeping jobs in the community, right? Everybody goes somewhere else to work. And I think that's where job opportunities tends to come from in communities like, Wildwood. And so how do you feel about that, Heather?
I just have a question. Has there been an exit interview of sorts when businesses do end up leaving? There has
Yes.
been.
Yeah, there
And do
has.
you find that there's
If they are willing to speak with the city.
is that not?
And a lot of the times they are, but if they leave and they don't show up, we try to make contact.
What do you feel are the common reasons?
Typically it's foot traffic, visibility. They want to be closer to a highway. It's usually the feedback we get, but a lot of the times it's more so external factors that we can't control, as in, hey, people are to shop more on Amazon. I don't have the type of retail product that's gonna make sense for paying really the overhead triple net at a spot here in town center. It's affordability.
A quick question. So you just hired somebody to work as our EDC, correct? So is that person's responsibility more about retention, or is it more about bringing new business and opportunities to what is their function? What are they focusing on?
I would say the focus is, the Economic Development Committee helps kind of guide some more of the major priorities, but I would say retention is a key focus because what we have is usually a lot of mom and pop shops. And they do need assistance. They need they will benefit more from the whole marketing campaign that we're doing right now, where we're giving everything a sticker, the Wildwood Proud business sticker. We're gonna be doing some social media campaigns with that to bring together, like if you shop here, it's got the sticker, take a picture, that type of thing. Recruitment, we just don't have, quite frankly, when you break down the statistics, and we were talking to developers, that would not necessarily developers, but big chains, they're not really looking at Wildwood because we don't have the traffic counts. So I think we just we can definitely do that. We want to have a very targeted approach of what type of business we want to see in Wildwood. We can go after it full swing. I just think we need to be measured in the sense that a lot of the times with these, like, I know it's mentioned here, fast food, more edible, more options for moms or driving home from work and they want to pick up something for the kids. Most fast food restaurants, the large chains, if you're not at 40,000 cars per day, they're not even gonna look at the space.
So what's the vacancy rate over in town center now?
Currently, it's about 92% occupied, so it's not as bad as some people might think, and it's pretty on par with the rest of the West County area.
Go ahead, Vince.
Regarding the traffic, I have to believe that Highway 100 and 109 have a track, but people aren't getting off those.
Yes.
So conceivably, if there is a way to capture that volume, perhaps that's where an effort could be made, just to get them off of 100 into Wildwood for the business purposes.
I think it's a very good point, and there is opportunity along 109 specifically, and quite frankly, 100 I know has been a little bit more taboo, but 109, there's a couple opportunities that we could talk about for different stop-off locations that would be drive-through friendly, but right now it's not.
Share taxes with.
Your turn.
Yeah, sorry, I'm writing and he was talking. I think you said that because your hand was up and then I'll come over here.
Well.
Okay, so here's,
Thank you.
so.
Mayor Garitano, we got 2 in the room and then I'm coming to you.
So first of all, on 109, I don't know anything about that, but I will say on Old Manchester, people don't know what's there. Today on Facebook, the Lucky, said we need help because there's not a clear, defined description of what they do, right? There's not. And so if people other than, they're not on planning and zoning or they're not in work for the city, they might not know what they do. It's not out there. The other thing is we need drive-throughs. They don't have to look like the bright yellow McDonald's drive-through. We have a great zoning process in the city of Wildwood where we could say you can have a drive-through, but it has to meet our conditions. And I think that would open up retail a little bit more. So.
It's an interesting point. I'm guessing if I asked that question broadly, I'd have, not even in this room, just in general, half the people would love that idea and half the people would hate it because it's just one of
Right,
those
that's
things.
pretty much it. But I think when you say drive-through, people have it in their head that they want, that it's McDonald's, the double drive-through, neon lights. And I think that you can absolutely do it not that way.
It's a good thought. I'm gonna come over here and then I'm going to the mayor.
I'm just saying, what was we share taxes with 3 cities?
No.
I thought that's how we got our revenue.
Lot.
Pool tax, but it's 94 different municipalities, mostly coming from Chesterfield. They're a pool A city, we're pool B.
And
but-
that's who we pull from? And we get a certain percentage, and
Per capita.
do we also contribute taxes to that conglomerate?
Yep.
So if we say, oh, well, if they go down the road to Chesterfield, we're still getting our cut where they open up in Chesterfield or here, right?
That is true. So if our residents, even though they're traveling outside of our city, if they purchase something in Chesterfield, that is going towards.
So that McDonald's in Chesterfield, we're still getting our cut, and we don't have the golden arches here. Nanny boo boo.
I'm coming over, Mayor Joe. Mayor
You
Joe,
should
what
see
you
us at
got?
P and Z.
Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I'm ready. You ready for me? Okay. So just to kind of continue on what Commissioner Jackson said, yes, we are part of the pool. So therefore, what we put into it and other cities put into it, we get our share based on population. We get more back than what we put into the pool. So we are a beneficiary of that. Another thing, just to be aware of, city, in case you didn't know, we do not collect any real estate tax in Wildwood. So whether there are 50 homes, 10,000 homes, we have about 12,000 households in the city. We do not collect any real estate tax. So for anyone who, for those people that have those perceptions that we build, or we don't really build, but they accuse us of being builders, that we build homes, we don't get any benefit out of it because, whether they build 50 homes or a developer builds 200 homes, we don't see an extra dime. The only benefit is the extra population. But back to economic development, I've got a lot of thoughts around that. I do want to share it, and I know that you're going to want to keep me moving here so you can keep the meeting on track. So try to be quick and brief. I think one of the major issues that we have as a city is that we have a pipeline of Wildwood residents that leaves the city in the morning and comes back at night because the jobs mostly they're not in Wildwood. We do not have the office parks like they have in Chesterfield or other places throughout the county. And so the people that leave in the morning, whether they go to work, whether it's at a school, at an office building, a retail business, they're going to spend their day wherever it is. And that means they go to lunch wherever it is. They stop at the dry cleaner on the way home wherever it is. They stop to pick up a cup of coffee wherever it is. So we are at a disadvantage already because we don't have the daytime population. And we've heard that from the restaurants here in Wildwood, that one of the biggest struggles they have had is having a lunch crowd because we just don't have as many people as you would, let's say, at Chesterfield in the Valley. So that's one issue that I see, that pipeline of Wildwood dollars leaving the city in the morning and being spent elsewhere. It would be great if we could find a way to retain that money in Wildwood to be spent in Wildwood. And again, the pool tax proves to us that it doesn't matter, right? It could be spent in Wildwood, it could be elsewhere. We're going to get still our share. But it is the ability to let these businesses thrive in Wildwood, right? Because the more they have that foot traffic, like Tom said, the more we have activity. And I think the challenge that we have is we have to build an economic ecosystem where you give people multiple reasons to want to stay and shop in Wildwood so that, you go by the dry cleaner, drop off your clothes, stop in for an ice cream cone in Wildwood, stop by the Deerbergs, do your multiple things all in one place. The problem is that today it's too easy. If someone wants to go to Target in Chesterfield Valley, well, then they'll go get lunch in Chesterfield Valley. And while they're down there, they might stop in a couple of other stores. So then again, that shopping that could have been done in Wildwood wasn't done here in Wildwood. And so I think that we have the ability to create that ecosystem. We've seen it work in Wildwood. We had we have three French hens. We had the porch. At one time, we had Imogene's. All businesses that probably competed for the same types of customers. But that ecosystem actually brought more people in because when they would go from one, they'd go to the next and then to the other. So I think if we give people more reasons to want to stay and shop in Wildwood, that will benefit our city as well. And there are other things around economic development, but I think one thing, and I hope you all saw this in the Gazette because I rave about it all the time, but Tom put together something in the Gazette that shows you the, how Wildwood compares with some of our neighbor cities. And I mean, earlier discussion, we talked about density and all. I mean, we're the lowest in density compared to any neighbor that we have. So that might be a great thing for some people. For businesses, it may not be a great thing. But one of the things I want to highlight with economic development is look at our sales tax rate. We're the lowest around. So if you do your Deerberg shopping trip here at the Wildwood Deerbergs, you're going to pay less than going to the Deerbergs over on Clayton Road that's in Ellisville. Or if you buy your cup of coffee at the Starbucks in Wildwood, it's less than buying the cup down the road. And I'll finish up with just a quick couple little stories around economic development. Tom could elaborate more. When word got out that the luxury apartments were being built next door to the movie theater, we had heard there were inquiries from some big restaurants that heard that was happening and that they wanted to come to Wildwood. And we had think of it as like almost like a salt and smoke. They heard about it, they wanted to come, and they wanted to be, I think, part of that development. They had set up a meeting with Tom, and again, it's not specifically salt and smoke, but to set up a meeting with Tom for a Thursday. And the guy that wanted to open up the restaurant called Tom like on the Tuesday, said, we're not going to have the meeting. And Tom said, why? And he said, well, I came in on a Monday morning just to kind of check out things in Wildwood. And I went to your local Panera there and it was empty. And I can't open a business here. We had Culver's that wanted to come to Wildwood. Well, they pitched their idea, but they needed a drive-through. They couldn't get it. A short while after, a Culver's opened up in Ellisville. We had Dunkin' Donuts that wanted to come to Wildwood. They presented an economic development meeting. And then after the meeting, they basically kind of walked the other way. They didn't like what they heard. So I think there are things that we could do better in our control. Again, it all depends on what we want for our city, but the opportunity's there. And, you know, we either got to try to take advantage of those good opportunities when they're there, because otherwise, once they pitch and they try, then they're not going to come back and try again. And then you're kind of left with a dwindling number of businesses that are going to come back. So that's all I got to say. And hopefully that makes sense.
I think that might be the final word on just this topic for public engagement, if that's okay?
Okay.
Go, or not, actually. Vince, go ahead.
You know, I know that you brought up about the drive-throughs as the mayor did as well. Are there any other obstacles that 20 years ago seemed like a good idea, applicable rules, regulations, whatever, but perhaps as time has gone by, we're hearing from developers that this is something we're banging up, that we should identify and say, hey, we need to take a closer look at this. Something that we don't allow, or, you know, types of businesses within reason. I mean, that historically we haven't thought of being here, that perhaps we need to examine and say, hey, we need to take a second look at this. Just.
I would say yes.
Okay, and we don't need to identify them all now, but that might be something we look at, like, do we need to change the way we're looking at things?
What don't we allow that gets in the way?
Yeah.
Right?
Spend the next 45 minutes getting through the next 4 items.
You want to keep going, is what you're telling me. I heard you.
Say one.
You can say anything you want. I heard you.
Well, when they're saying it meets community needs and contributes to the quality of life. To me, in my head, that doesn't mean businesses and bringing businesses into the city.
Okay.
That means what do the residents prefer? What would enhance their quality of life? We don't really have a definition of that. But if you go through the whole thing, you hear things like a library, a recreation center, those kinds of things. While they're somewhat a business, they're services, and that's more of what they're interested in, maybe than a McDonald's or whatever. They want family-friendly restaurants. So it's not like a business that, I don't know, it's not a developer, it's not so much a grocery store, even though you need grocery stores. It's more the things that are personally important to them and what they believe would expand their quality of life. We talked about a library for a long time, Tom and I did. We can't get it because we don't have enough people. We even talked about a smaller library, and that would maybe attract people. But if you had something like a building, like a recreation center, where you could have a senior citizens events there, where you could have early childhood events there, where you could have some sort of library type resource. Those kinds of things that people are really wanting and needing, especially if you have a family with young kids, then I think those kinds of things would bring people into town center. And then maybe you could expand on the ice cream store that's already left us, are those things that families want. You know, when Benedetto's was here, it was way too expensive to take a family to that restaurant. So I think you need to really think when you say bring business in, what is that quality that families are looking for? Not so much what developers are looking for or investors are looking for, and yeah, that's an investment, but what is it that's really important to families that live here, especially young families that live here?
So what I just heard, which I think is interesting, tying to the jobs and issue of economic development, is something you said at the end. You said, if you create that service, to your point, you create the foot traffic in a certain place that starts to feed the ecosystem that the mayor is discussing, because you get those people that those businesses are not seeing. You've come up with a creative idea to say, how do I get the bodies in this space that then businesses can start to benefit from? It's an interesting idea, and that's exactly the kind of thing we want to capture. Who else was there?
I definitely think that's what families are looking for. They're looking for involvement, and that also takes care of the family-friendly community because they're there more often, doing fun things more than going out for fast food or something. It's involvement.
Deb, do you think from what you're hearing in this conversation that it's reflecting some of what your read was as you were going through this process?
I do, and I think it's also in the cultural and recreation section.
That this is kind of that tie together.
Same thing.
Interesting, okay. Other comments on this section?
I just want to give kudos to Becky. She's done such a good job of bringing awareness to our local businesses. I personally appreciate her. She goes all out and putting in site visits at different places. And I think, especially as a business owner, and I'm sure April would agree, that we appreciate you.
That's awesome, thank you. But that marketing of local businesses, right? Buy local or use local, or how do you stop when you're on your way home versus when you've just left the office? That's an intentional awareness kind of piece of the puzzle, certainly. But I'm teaching an economic development course now, and everything that you're talking about, retention has to be first. If you're losing businesses, it's hard to gain new ones. Understanding what you do have to understand what those developers are looking for. Because if you don't, they're not coming no matter how good it is. So understanding what they need to do business, which I know your guys do all the time, and understanding why you're not getting those businesses. That's a piece of that whole, if we want to change that, there's a reckoning though. Like when that developer or whatever says, in order to do what you want to do, I'm making this up. You have to have an industrial court that adds X amount of jobs, and you go, that's not who we are. There's your tension and your trade-off that you were talking about, Dan, right? It's like, okay, which Wildwood are we gonna be now? Hannah, your hand is up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, I'm so chatty. I just wanted to piggyback off of what, I don't remember who made the comment about a recreation center. I have said that so many times going into town center, and I know I'm gonna get skewered for this on like next door. But I've said, like, I do have a young family. I love Wildwood, where I don't want to go during the summer. I don't want to go to Ellisville Edge. I don't want to drive to Baldwin Point. I want to stay in my community without impinging on the people that are on bigger lots that are west of 109. But if we had some sort of, Eureka, the Timbers there is a much smaller rec facility and a much smaller pool than something like Baldwin or Ellisville has. There was a way we could capture that on a smaller scale, but keep that area populated with families flowing through it year round. It could drive up a lot of revenue and a lot of interest. And it's a long-term solution instead of a short-term, like, hey, let's get one business in here for a year or two lease. And that's all I have to say on that. But I think that would be a wonderful idea. And yes, that is what young families are looking for.
We're gonna get to this, by the way, when we get to that section of the plan. So that's kind of awesome that you're bringing that up as an idea now. I'm gonna go back here because I think you're leaving shortly.
I do
Yep,
have to leave,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. But when everybody's talking about recreation, the first thing I come to, we have a recreation facility here in Wildwood, and that's our YMCA. They have amazing, incredible programs. Jody has her community garden. Jen is working really hard on the memberships. I pop in there every once in a while, and it's just amazing, all the different programs. And sometimes half the battle is just making sure people are aware of what is offered. And the Y offers a lot for very reasonable, and they help families that can't afford to be able to do things.
I can't insert a lot of personal anything, but I do want to give you an example of something that you may or may not be aware of. In the city of St. Louis, there are two major recreation centers that are Ys. So they are conglomerations of the Y and the city recreation center, where there is a partnership where the Y is kind of running the city stuff. And so that, I'm not saying that happens because you already got a Y. They built those to be that way, but I'm giving you the example that there are certainly examples in the region of the Y kind of creating a joint identity with the city to become both of those things. And so that could be an interesting question for you if you've already got that. That's the most I will go into personal experience on that. Madam?
Yes, just maybe a segue into the housing.
Be my guest.
When I was on the council and speaking with a lot of the businesses and not being a business owner myself, I'm not sure that this is common throughout the businesses, but some of them said that they were closing because they couldn't keep help. They couldn't have dependable workers because they had to pay a minimum wage. People that made minimum wage couldn't live in Wildwood. They had to live outside, but couldn't afford to drive here, so they would start and leave very often. So they had a big turnover, and also they had minimum wage. They were usually the young people who were in school or had other things to do that they couldn't keep regular hours. So maybe, you know, if we're gonna have businesses that require low wages, we need to have someplace for these people to live.
So now you're getting into, like, to your point, you're getting into the affordable housing piece. And what is affordable housing? By the way, talk about language that triggers people, right? I mean, I've had that discussion. Affordable these days, I'm gonna give you the reality check of what we discuss all the time. Affordable housing is your kids that are getting out of college. It's probably a nurse that's just starting out, right? It's somebody that's at the beginning of their profession, because right now nothing is affordable. So we tend to think generationally, a lot of us, of affordable housing becomes poverty housing, Section 8 housing. The affordable housing conversation is becoming about people that are making what we would have considered a working class income, you know, who are working hard 40 hours a week and they can't afford to buy a house. So I just want you to remember that there's some language around affordable that has some really strong connotations that bring up things that may not be what it's really about anymore. So there's an interesting, we haven't kept up with the times. What else on, we can go to, we can do that, but I think we're at that jobs thing. I think we've heard what you think you've read. You've come up with some really interesting, creative, kind of cool, I'm not gonna say solutions, but concepts that could be thought about in a long range place. Let's do, I guess affordable housing is actually the next one. So building on what Ms. Teresa said, are there any other comments about housing not dense? I'm gonna take density, this whole density conversation, we've hit that one already. So give me something new if you've got it.
Well, unfortunately, when you build a house, you have to build it on land, and the land in Wildwood is not cheap.
Right.
So that's the major portion of the price of the home.
Right, land is expensive. Now you guys, I'm gonna throw the thing in, you guys as part of your plan, because I know it, have lots of different types of housing. I mean, you have in town, I know there are people living in condos and apartments and can walk to town center, and there are people living on 5 and 10 acres here, so, or more, actually. So, I mean, how does that look to you guys?
So obviously, this is my
Your piece?
topic to talk about, but right now, we have a client who's purchasing a property at Victoria's Crossing for around $170,000, and we are listing one around $180,000. So I do think it's relative. Are you wanting to move into a beautiful, we have homes $2 million plus, but we also do have some affordable housing. And housing in St. Louis in general just isn't affordable. It really isn't anywhere anymore because of many factors. So I do, again, perspective, just letting people know 180,000, and also their association fees are not outrageous compared to many other places.
But again, I'm not pushing back. Please don't hear it that way. I think that goes back to as a group, what is affordable? Because I can tell you, I mean, these guys can tell you, the chances are, think about your kids coming out of college. They're probably not buying $185,000 home if they don't want to rent, right? If they wanted, I want my first home, right? That first home for a lot of them is $95,000 to $110,000, right? So that doesn't exist here. And that the question for me just becomes, do you want it to? It's not that it should, it's do you want it to? Here comes Raman.
I'd also like to say there's plenty of people who just can't afford to purchase a home, period.
And so rent,
And they have to rent.
Right.
Very fair.
So
And our
rentals, right?
prices are astronomical too, at this point. It's
Yes.
not just housing, like purchasing, the rent prices are.
I'm gonna
crazy
put
high.
rentals up here as well, so that's a great one.
That's what I was gonna build
Go for
on
it, Jim.
with the development that's going next door. That will be a great bellwether to a lot of developers about how that is received. That will be the first, great experiment with
Rental development.
apartments. And I think those are, I have no idea where the price range is gonna be, but that might be where that nurse, maybe not the one that just graduated from nursing school, but maybe has been in the profession, single and doesn't necessarily want all the obligations of owning a home.
Average rent is 1,400.
Ellisville Baldwin and what's available here. The new one that they're putting
Tell
up,
everybody.
yeah, the new one they're putting up next to the Starbucks starts at 1,500. So if you think that's affordable,
Where's that in?
the new where the Starbucks is,
Coming there. in a
right,
minute.
that's on the edge there. Start at 1,500 and go up to 2,700.
This is a really hard topic.
Like, that's not affordable. I mean, if you're making $40,000 a year, if you can afford 1,400 for rent plus utilities, you might.
I guess is the question, the affordability or the availability?
Oh,
We have no control over the cost, if you will, but
Yes, we do.
no, I
Affordability.
mean, but we have two major apartment
Available.
complexes in the city, on the eastern end of the city, right? We have, and then there's probably a sprinkling of rental housing throughout, but I don't know that from the affordability standpoint, that I think we can have to do something about the availability, but I don't know about the affordability.
Got it. I got it. Mayor Joe, I see you, but I'm gonna do Teresa first, okay? Hang on a sec.
I'm good. with
You're
Mayor-
good?
Mayor.
Okay, Mayor, go ahead, and then we'll get to Ms. Clark.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to finish what Vince was just saying. I think a lot of people fail to realize or forget that they're even there. But we have two major apartment complexes in Wildwood that I believe puts about 300 apartments or so, because I know one of them has 150. And there are 20 buildings comprised of these apartment complexes, because Carriage Place, the one in Lake Chesterfield, you count about 10, and about another 10 or so sets of buildings over on the other side of 100 in Rockwood Springs. So I think sometimes it kind of gets lost because they're almost a little hidden out of the way. I mean, you can't miss them when you're on 100, but they're part of Wildwood.
Great, thank you. Okay, hang on, I'm gonna do some order because there's lots of people waiting. I'm coming here, I'm going there, and then I'm going there. Fair? Go ahead.
Just a point about having the apartments and looking at maybe approving more of that type of housing in Wildwood might be something that we should concentrate on, because like my son graduated colleges in engineering 3 years ago, and all of his friends that graduated and now are engineers, aeronautical engineers, most of them, they all want apartments. They don't want to buy a house. And so if all of the people that age in their late 20s are the same as this group, then we're growing out of the housing that we all wanted, all of our houses and our dishes and all of this stuff that they don't want anything to do with. And so maybe looking at the developments that come in with a different light, a different eye again, I shouldn't say density because we passed that, but the dense areas in the town center to put more in.
Where do they go, right? Where are they located?
It is really important that we look at, we are going to need this for the future instead of, I guess that's the balance.
It's embracing it between versus protecting against it. That's what's going on. Promised, I'm coming there next.
To Jim's point, the cost of land, affordable housing is gonna be attached multi-story apartment. And that's what we have to grapple with.
Yeah.
How many multi-story attached apartment buildings do we want and where would we want?
Yep. I'm gonna go staff first.
I just want to say that I don't necessarily think that we have to have multi-story attached apartment buildings. Communities all over the country are experimenting with all kinds of things like accessory dwelling units in the city of Wildwood. We have a lot of restrictions because we don't want renters to live in mother-in-law units. However, if we were looking at increasing housing affordability, that might be one area to look at, and maybe not all over the city, but in certain areas, it might be realistic to allow people to have a secondary dwelling unit for, someone who wants to live, out in Wildwood but can't afford, a home yet. So I think that's a possibility. Communities are experimenting with things like missing middle housing, which is smaller scale multifamily, duplexes, courtyard apartments, things of that nature. And there's different ways and mechanisms to achieve that goal as well. So I think that there are possibilities to explore that aren't necessarily towers of apartments, which I'm not sure is really in
What you are anyway, I don't think, it wouldn't happen. I think the point that you're hearing though is this is what is your community gonna be, right, in the next 10 years? That's the whole point of the master plan. But also recognizing that there's a lot of really cool stuff out there, product out there that may fit what you could be looking for that you're not necessarily aware of. I keep going back to the question somebody asked over here, which is, I think it was Vince that said, are we doing things that are getting in the way because we're holding on to something? And the answer here may be yes too, if you ask your planning folks, right? Like there may be a few restrictions that could loosen up or some ideas that you could see or be, recognized. Rob, I'm coming to you.
Now?
Sure.
Okay,
Right now.
Lisa, Dan, and Robin, I agree with everything that they said. I think we need lower cost affordable housing. It doesn't, everybody's not gonna buy a home. But the only point remaining to be said is that apartments at the eastern end of Wildwood do nothing for town center. And town center is really the key to this whole puzzle.
It's that density, people walking and getting to
Right,
those
exactly
stores.
right. Making a walkable community, that was the vision 30 years ago, et cetera. And
If you
we-
put that some density of population, forget the density of apartments, then you get the rec center, the apartment, the whatever, and I'm here.
Correct.
That's what you're telling us,
Yes.
right? Great. Go ahead, Cindy.
I'll just add
New
one
voice.
more thing. I mean, being on planning and zoning for a few years, there's been a number of developments that have been brought up that had more affordable housing. And there were tons of comments by our community that they didn't want it.
They didn't want it.
So we have to balance, the people who would be most affected by those kinds of developments and the necessity of having it. So we need to be,
That tension.
Yeah.
Right, and the understanding of how it impacts your economy, right? Going back to, coming over there. He's helping. He's my co-facilitator.
And as far as housing is concerned, that's one aspect of it, but we need to look at workers in the town center area to increase foot traffic for our restaurants and our other businesses.
Well, I just keep thinking right now about when Joe gave you the history, the town center, and don't take it as advocating, right? But the town center was originally supposed to be larger, right? And the footprint got smaller. And people, I know that there are people who here have talked about it in that we don't want more town center, or we want more town center. I think as you guys and as staff comes to that, how to resolve that conflict, there's going to have to be, like you said, a lot of data around it, right? This is the why. This is what it produces. These are all the consequences. This is the effect. It's not just about building housing. It's about jobs and walkability and workers and all these other things, because most people are not, average people that are not doing this the way you are not thinking about it that way. Not most days.
I say this whole discussion's been about, it's a socio-economical
It is.
scale.
Yep,
Is what
sure
it
is.
is. And to Vince's point, we can't control the pricing unless it is a low income housing, and that is controlled by our government, right? And yet people on the P and Z, Cindy's point, they don't want lower income housing. As an example, just down the street here, if I'm pointing the right way, at the roundabout, those are technically condominiums, but they're essentially apartments. And I know for a fact that people were buying them up with low interest rates and renting them out, and the police were down there nonstop. And they finally, the trustees voted and said, you cannot rent anymore. But once it's sold, it's a condominium and only you can live in that. And that's it. And there's like 5 down there that are still grandfathered in that they can lease out. But again, those are some of the things that you come up with.
The city trump an HOA, because the city has in their ordinance that it has to be immediate family members and so on and so forth. Is that not correct?
Well, they have it in their indentures. So when somebody purchases that home, they're signing off on those indentures. You're
Correct.
practically entering in that agreement. So the city can't force you. Your indentures are like, you almost would start with the indentures. If the indentures goes against directly what the city says, then yeah, those are null and void. But same goes with us when we're reviewing state statute and federal law.
Yeah, because I was the president of the HOA for Hickory Manor in Gordon. Those indentures were done in '99 and they're so outdated, and it states nothing in there about rental, and we have people doing it and then they complain it has to go to the city, and the city sends a letter saying it has to be X, Y, and Z, and
When
And that's-
indentures are done, they are submitted to the city and then our attorney. reviews
I'm
them.
gonna stop that one because that's a pretty
yeah,
technical
no, that's fine.
conversation. And I'm gonna come over to you.
It's a hard subject, but the question really is, do we need customers or do we need workers? Right now, we need customers. We don't need workers, we need customers. Is that fair?
I think we do need work.
I think you need both. I'm guessing you need both.
You need both.
Workers we need to support the customer base we have today.
I think when the people are driving, now I'm giving opinions.
Yeah, don't do that today.
Yeah,
That's not yours.
I'm not doing
It's hard to do.
Yep.
Why I keep saying it's not really, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do Heather, and then I gotta be honest, I'm watching that. This has been an incredible conversation that we didn't actually plan on. So this is gonna happen, and Joe, we all talked about that, how we wanted to be flexible to get some of this feedback. I'm gonna come there, and then I'm gonna see if we can't do something general about the last couple, because again, I think there might be some agreement on some of it, and if we have to, we'll come back to it. But I do wanna go back to Deb and ask her for her. I'm gonna come back to you to just ask about your thoughts about how this conversation aligns with sort of everything that you've
I
read.
think it aligns really well with the survey data and what all the comments.
You're sort of, it's all right there, okay? Heather, go for it.
I just want to address what Robin said, and she talked about ADUs, which a lot of people, general people, are unfamiliar with. And one of the reasons is because, to my knowledge, the Central West End is the only municipality that really allows ADUs, and it really could be a solution.
What are they?
So I'll use the Central West End as an example. They have carriage houses there, and they're able to rent them out. So they're an additional dwelling unit on a property that's owned. So California does a lot of them. There's some really neat, innovative things that people are proposing. I read I could give a long dissertation, but I won't. So I don't know where we need to start in trying to look at that, but that could be a solution without even having to build more, honestly.
We were doing missing middle and accessory dwelling units in St. Pete when I was a planner there. It was one of our major initiatives. And so that was definitely something we were exploring, and there's a lot of research and analysis that has to go into it. Anything you do like that, but I think they've been seeing some good results.
Well, and you put the control within the homeowners, they get to choose who's going to live on their property, so they have a greater say.
Thank you. So I'm gonna shortchange a little and just say on enhanced cultural and recreational amenities, we've heard the comment about rec centers, small rec centers, centrally located libraries, all those kinds of ideas that feed all this other stuff. So I'm gonna say I don't probably need to capture that again. I think we've covered that. But are there anything other quick comments that anybody has? And again, I'm not shortchanging, but I think we've covered some of this already on the recreational slash cultural stuff. Go for it.
Well, the only thing I would say is that I noticed time and time again, if they want pool, it came over. And I know that we offer a discount with some of the neighboring neighborhoods or towns,
Sorry,
but
'cause I'm
once
mixing
this park gets done next door, I hope that maybe that will answer some of this family-friendly stuff and we'll get more people coming in to use that park and then maybe walk more, because that would be really like the only park in downtown, right? So hopefully, if you build it, they will come kind of a deal. And then, maybe keep in the back of our minds a pool.
Pools are very,
No.
very, very expensive. That's
Right.
what these guys are gonna tell you. They're fabulous and yeah, I think I already heard that.
Kind
Thank
of
you though.
kick back to what you said about maybe, in
Just let me know.
conjunction with the YMCA or something else, but
Right.
just in the back of your minds because it's requested over and over and over again, so.
Right.
Okay.
No, I'm just telling you, but
Right.
like pools are the bane of a lot of cities' existence. I'm gonna go up there to Hannah first because Hannah, go ahead.
I'm gonna die on the pool hill. I'm so sorry. The YMCA, my family is a member. They do not have an outdoor pool. They do not have a splash pad. That is not what young families are looking for. We want an outdoor pool. We have wonderful parks. Yes, I agree, but it's people, when they say pool, they don't mean an indoor pool at the Y. They want an outdoor pool.
Fair, thank you for the clarification. Coming back to Teresa, I'm coming over to April.
So as far as the cultural
We're
goes,
moving now.
I just want to point out what Ms. Keefe does and with the cultural focus on our native Wildwood residents or residents of this land. And she's done an amazing job with bringing together Native Americans and
Got
the
it.
Black community. And so that is really, if we can put more focus on that, we can show that we really are focused on our cultural improvements. And if you don't know about what she's done with that, please look into it because it's amazing, all of the research she's put into it. But my question is for the department, well, maybe for Thomas, Mr. Lee, how much do we depend on the pool tax? And is it a viable resource that we should put all of our focus in and say, oh, well, we've got the pool tax and we can lean on that, that's our crutch. But should we have like a plan B in case like Chesterfield pulls out and that's a major amount of money that's out of that? So do we have a plan B?
Plan B is cutting services. It makes up about 50% of your operating budget. I mean, it pays, I look at it like this, we're paying our entire police services contract with the pool tax.
But isn't that state mandated? I mean.
It is, it would have to go, the way I look at it,
They can't just pull it.
they could, that would be chaos and they would be, their constituents, our constituents would be out with torches. That said, they could do so, if they were gonna do something, it would be something that kind of turns it off slowly. It'd be not all at once, but it would probably be like a 5-year path. And in that case, what we've calculated is that at least 5 years. So you would be able to go out and unfortunately at that point, we would have to get either close down parks, close down services, or offer another revenue source.
So we could do an entire class and we don't have time in the next 10 minutes between pool and point of sale. I will just tell you that if there was an issue with the pool versus the point of sale that Chesterfield or anybody else did, the entire region would shift and there would be a very large regional discussion, not just here, right? That's not just gonna affect here.
My point is that we should become independent with our budget and not have to depend on this in case something happens. So our focus is try to build these up. I know that we want to do what the majority of people want in the city, but sometimes I know it's a hard decisions to make, but sometimes we have to make decisions that is not the majority of the people what they want.
So to your point, Teresa, it's about finding a way, if possible, to focus on moving away from dependence, whether it's on the pool. I mean, we talk about sales tax dependence all the time here. So those kind of, but I will tell you, and I'm just gonna sort of put that hat on for a second, that you do not, there was somewhere here that said you do not have a property tax, right? And cities that don't have that retail tax tend to need that property tax, and I'm guessing that would be a very hard discussion as well. So just food for thought about what that looks like. Rob, and then I'm coming here, there's nobody up there, and then it's 21, I'm gonna do this in 3 minutes, because I wanna go around the table once.
Very quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry, April, no, hang on a second, I totally spaced April.
It's okay, I
No,
know,
it's not.
I'm so overstimulated because you guys have had just so much.
A lot.
A lot
Great
of just great
discussion.
information and ideas, and in full transparency, I don't know how I did not get this or see it, I don't know if it's my junk, I got the itinerary, I got some things, I did not see that, I've been looking forward to
There's-
reading this, and so I can't wait
There's
to.
plenty of weeks.
So, yes, so that being said, and this is my first time doing this, so listening to all you guys talk is just, I'm gonna be up for days thinking about things and my brain's gonna be going down, but I mean, even
You've
when
been
we started the
sucked
meeting
in.
with different perspectives from age groups, we moved here 8 years ago when my family was younger, and I have no history of Wildwood, and my brain is squirrely, so follow with me here. I really thought all of Wildwood was still, everybody had 3-acre lots and it was country and rural and parks and whatever. And then we moved here, and the summer after we moved here, the villages of Brightleaf, is that right? Started, I mean, like all the trees are gone. Well, whoa, okay, some things are happening. This is before I owned a business here. My kids were younger. So to the point earlier, again, I'm bouncing all around. Is it Teresa or Vicky? Teresa, Miss Teresa, yellow sweater. Okay. So you had pointed out the college, the young adults looking for places to live and need, I think that is awesome because they are the next generation of Wildwood, St. Louis County, et cetera. They don't do a lot of cooking or my young adult 20-somethings don't.
They order out.
So to have housing for them is great. Also having, I mean, Town Center is such a cool place that if we could, when we visit other cities and towns that have that walkability, whether you're in a hotel or, you know, have the mixed use, commercial, residential, it's so cool because they are, my 16-year-old doesn't have anywhere to work. He is working at the Culver's in Ellisville. So when I found out there could have been a Culver's in Wildwood, I was like, oh, I have not been as actively involved as I should have been doing, and I really want to watch some of these zoning planning things to know what's happening and not happening now that I'm hearing all of this. But since a lot of this is families, to your point about the families, at one of the points, I'm not disagreeing with that at all. At one point, Mayor Joe said that only 1/3 of households in Wildwood have kids younger than 18. That's not a big group of people when you look at the overall majority. So I don't know if the rest of our people are more senior citizens, not senior citizens, but are we my age and up? Are we getting toward retirement? And when those people move out, is it the young professionals? It's our next. So I don't know who to focus on. I don't know the answers, but the other thing I wanted to bring up as far as the recreation, I love the pool.
You're doing
Raised
fine.
my kids at the pool in Ellisville, because that's, and I lived in Franklin County at the time. But a pool is from May to September. It's still not a year-round thing, right? The Y is a fabulous resource. But the other thing is, what about those kids in the middle? I had 4 kids. They were all actively involved in sports. And just, my youngest son is the only one I still have in school here, but all of his friends, I mean, and anybody in this room that knows or has teenagers or young adults, I mean, everybody's in club ball, soccer, baseball, whatever. And none of those complexes are here, nor do we have the space, nor is it probably planned. We spent 5 to 6 months of our year driving to Creve Coeur or Chesterfield or St. Charles for the soccer complexes. My boys play soccer. I know we have Pond Athletic, or is I calling it right, the baseball field, but that's not in Town Center. That's not, you know, when people leave Pond, they're probably going to Chesterfield. When we were in Creve Coeur, we're going to the nearest place because my son's dying to eat.
So the city actually that's really embraced that, aside from Chesterfield here, right, with the sports complexes along the, is O'Fallon, Illinois. They've actually gone and built.
That's a beautiful
But they just, by the way, that was a master plan thing. They said, we are going to create economic development around sports things. Okay, I'm gonna stop you, April, because it's 8:26 and I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm getting faces. So here's what I'd like to do. Good faces, not bad faces. We got to job opportunities. We got to enhanced cultural recreational. We got to, we did not get to governance, but we did get to some civic engagement stuff on all this education kind of piece, just so you can see it that way. And I know that we're going to have a whole week that's dealing with the whole preservation of character and history. So I'm sure, I'm so covered with stuff. I'm sure we're gonna go back to that, so I'm not worried about it. What I'd like to do really quickly is I'd like to just go to Deb for any last word about this. Was completely unplanned. It wasn't supposed to go this way. I could get fired for this, but you guys did great bringing up all of these things based on what you read and brought out a lot of issues that we certainly were seeing in these comments and what the problem, the tension is between them. Deb, what do you think in terms of the takeaway for this group on this discussion?
I think it's accurate. I think everything that everybody brought up is very accurate and representative of what came through in the survey, but also as a resident, what I've heard living here for 20 years.
That's awesome.
It's very reflective, and even, you know, we didn't talk about government civic engagement specifically, but that is all tied into everything that we've talked about and the tension between what people want and what they think is happening.
And I think Teresa, that and to what that we can do, right? And the reality of what we can do. I'm gonna stop. I'm cutting comment unless you guys want to stay another half hour, which I'll get in trouble for. So here's what I'd like to do next, if that's okay. Joe, the 2 or 3 things we need to cover rather quickly are if there's any public comment, to see if there is, and I think that's up to you and the chair. And then next steps, which is gonna obviously be to come back to the environmental piece, but.
Mr. Chair, public comment. Is there anybody on Zoom that would like to speak?
We have none in attendance that aren't on Zoom that aren't on the group or staff.
No, he was saying.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So are we allowed to call for you guys' purposes, public comment open and closed because there's no one outside the group here to make a public comment? Is that okay with you? It's all right. So that'll be reflected in the minutes. Joe, I want to turn around to you before we go back and just say, this was not exactly where we were thinking we would go. I love the fact that your staff looked at me and your chair looked at me and said, let's pivot. That's exactly what we want to do. So everybody feels heard. What do you want next steps to be, I think, in terms of what you're thinking and what you heard tonight?
Well, first and foremost on the agenda, the next meeting is Tuesday, May 13th. If you have it, mark it down in your calendars, if you would, please, be much appreciated. This has been mentioned, we didn't get to the environmental element, so we'll start there with our discussion. Meeting. Other than that, remains, Mr. Chair, is the last word, just going around the table to make sure we didn't miss it.
And guys, we had a discussion about this. I really wanted you to understand that the reason we want to do this is some of you are quieter than others, and we just want to make sure that anything that you were thinking, you do get a chance to say. So remember, you can pass if you want. You're passed, okay?
We started review of your information with the misperception that the comments were overdeveloping or not maintaining the rural. And we're trying to overcome that perception, but I think when the luxury apartments start in town center, when the reserve starts, and when the corner there by Brightleaf starts, even those have already been approved, people are gonna say, what do you mean? We're gonna go through this all again. Because it's gonna be visible at that point. You got a little inkling of it along Manchester Road west of 109 right now, just some cutouts. But when if they start the luxury apartments and that, then we're gonna really get hit with that. Oh, you're overdeveloping, and this is stuff that, it's gonna be difficult for us to overcome the fact that we're not doing that. This is planned, but we'll face that as we go through this. So.
Thank you. Cindy, we're gonna keep going. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point. At every opportunity and in every appropriate forum, I evangelize about the reality of our tax, of our revenue streams. And the utilities taxes are drying up. Pool tax, Chesterfield keeps trying to yank it. We don't have a sales tax and we don't have a real estate tax. We need to the extent possible, document our plan B, our revenue plan B in the master plan. It seems appropriate to me. We've got to take some steps and start laying the groundwork now for a parks and erosion sales tax of some kind and all those other things. So I'd like everybody to think about that because I think we need to brainstorm about that specific point before this is all said and done. So. thank you.
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna let you just one to the other.
I talked a lot, I'll pass.
Your pass. Cool?
Is the perception versus reality thing is a huge issue. I talk with people all the time who have incorrect perception, and to the degree that we can, maybe we should use the Gazette to try to demonstrate that, even if we did nothing else but show a 30-year development trend. I think that would be a dramatic statement if we could show a graph of that. 30 years ago, there was ungodly amount of lots being approved, and what we're approving now is minuscule in comparison.
Well, I'm in agreement with that. I think that's a great idea. I have to think about all these ideas that were brought forth tonight. There were a lot of things I hadn't even considered. So I need to do a lot more thinking.
Cool. I think that's the whole point.
Need to have, nice to have.
Needs versus wants. We talked about this for several hours in a class last night.
Revenue's
Needs
not
versus
finite.
wants. A great point. And who thinks what's a need and what's a want? Pass. Clark?
I'm good with having an extra half hour in the meeting. It seems
Oh,
like-
hello. Wow, that's a compliment. That means this was not a waste of time. Like
It's not a waste of time.
that, I mean, that you felt like it was well used.
I think it was well used, and it engages us as committee members in the actual working of this. And since it's a working meeting, and not a workshop, it's something that we can do. And now we can go home and make our list of all of the things that we didn't say. And with those, do you want us to send to you, to Joe, or is it overwhelming to get all of those? So
That's a really interesting question.
What to do?
If somebody has thoughts between meetings and wants to share them, what's the best way for them to do that? To sort of put them in the file?
Can email them to me and then we'll circulate them with the group here. Make sure that they're part of the product you get for the next meeting.
That's pretty cool.
Survey. They can submit so it could all be just pulled up in an Excel.
Talk about that.
We'll figure out a way to do it, but I love that idea, right? But it shouldn't just be, you shouldn't be circulating, you should be going to one point so that then it can be shared with everybody. That's really important, right? That it's not just one-on-one. I'm coming to Mr. Jackson.
You all know I've talked too much the last two meetings. Other than that, we'll let April know the next P and Z's next Monday.
That's a good announcement.
Done?
Keep going.
I think we need to keep our minds open for new ideas. I
Love
learned
that.
something tonight about ADUs. I hadn't even thought about it. I see it on television all the time, but let's just not dismiss anything. Let's just consider anything we can.
That's congratulations. That's an amazing thing for a group to get to, right from where you started. So I do this a lot. That's a big deal.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, he's gonna pass. Sorry, you're not a he, but he's gonna pass. And then I usually use names, not that you're not a he.
It doesn't matter.
Came out rough.
Yeah, I just, as far as data goes, Joe, how many subdivisions have been developed in the last 30 years?
What does that cost?
Depends. Many of them were approved by St. Louis County but hadn't started. And there's those that the city has approved, but I'd have to do a little research to tell you. I'd only be guessing.
Okay, because the statistics that were given earlier, I'm not sure it includes the developments that are in progress. So I'd really like to know how many subdivisions has Wildwood allowed in the last 30 years?
I think we've got a lot of cool questions around the table about this concept of what does the data look like? You've got a couple of really good examples. I'm gonna keep going. We heard you. I'm not gonna, we're gonna do staff, but I'm gonna do you guys last. John Metz, if you'd like to turn on your microphone and let us know, because you guys have been pretty quiet. Is there anything you have to add?
Not really. It's been very interesting.
Good. Glad you thought so. Hannah?
I think it's been a great meeting, super informative, and just going forward, I think there's obviously we have to focus on needs versus wants and maybe long-term revenue versus long-term solutions versus short-term solutions for sure.
Mayor Joe?
Yeah, I want to thank you for your work facilitating, extremely beneficial having you in this role. You are able to extract the information out of everyone here and have a very fruitful, productive conversation. So just my final thoughts here. I think we're reaching a pivotal point in this history, the history of this city here, that, we either have to, get, get things happening around our city that bring to life a lot of the things we heard from our residents in the survey. And, I think that we do need to rely on data. There is a perception problem, but we can control the narrative. It is up to us to rewrite that narrative so that it is the truth. And like the expression is, in order to get the message across, we can't just put it in the Gazette. That's just not enough. You have to say it 7 times, 7 different ways in order to get the message. And we all have to play a part in that. And then in our conversations, if someone brings up something that's wrong, we have to steer them in the correct direction and give them the right information and so forth. And I think that's when we can finally pivot this narrative where we bring excitement to our city. We bring energy and buzz so that people are excited and look forward to things. And we can get away from any of the negativity or the resistance to fulfilling the vision of Wildwood. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Mayor. So what we're gonna do is we'd usually include staff, but tonight you've heard from several of them and we're gonna skip that for time because you have heard from staff a little bit this evening. But yes, absolutely. If staff would like to say a last word.
I
may
have
let
my
you know
last
here?
word ready. I just wanted to say, wearing my planning cap, that I don't know if anyone else noticed, but every single topic we talked about this evening was interrelated with every other topic. So as we go through our master planning process, we talked about economic development, but then we started talking about housing before we even got to the housing. Cultural heritage preservation.
All the way back here.
We talked about accessory dwelling units. Another way to preserve some of our historic structures in the city of Wildwood could potentially be accessory dwelling units, because instead of tearing down what's there, they keep it as that secondary unit. Sustainable development, that kind of feeds right into that as well. So just remember, as we go from element to element to element, all of these things are interrelated, and some of them, are actually a solution for one might be a solution for another. So just
Very
remember to
cool.
connect those dots.
Last word comes to me about the incredible work your staff did about what you asked for, which was this summary. So I'm gonna give you the homework now, which is, because we now know what we're doing next time, right? Is make sure you've really looked at this summary, make sure you've looked at the detail in your book about this summary, because the homework is gonna be what we're going to be doing, is sort of going through that goals, objectives, priorities stuff and saying, okay, we've got 5 retains and I'm gonna do that same general discussion. What bothered you? What was a concern? What do you think's missing? And so I want you to use this and make notes and come with those, because that's exactly where the discussion's gonna go. That's your big hint, okay? Are we good? The chair needs to call for adjournment.
Yep, first of all, I want to thank everybody.
You were
for
great.
A great meeting, and especially Debbie for an excellent.
Oh, yeah.
presentation. On that, we'd like to propose a motion to adjourn.
Jim moves. Who's second?
Everyone at the same time.
You need a second.
Jim's got it. Vicky.
Vicky seconds. All
All in favor?
Aye.
got it.
Any opposed?
Hey, thank you.
You all.
Like, until you get out.
Yes. Not just the board notes, but kind of the whole thing. Travis just